Howdy folks, Nathan here with the Fast Lane Car. Did you know that back in 1986, Acura was one of the first luxury Japanese automakers out there? They even predated Lexus and Infiniti. And one of their main points was tech, high tech, and luxury, and of course performance. Now, we've driven this vehicle before. This is the Acura RDX A-Spec. And it's a fantastic driving vehicle, but there's a lot more to it. And part of that has to do with the tech. In fact, a lot of it has to do with the tech. So what we're going to explore is the inside of this vehicle, all of its tech, and we're going to tell you all about it, both the good and the bad. Like all other Acura RDXs, this one has the 272 horsepower four-cylinder engine that puts out 280 pound-feet of torque. It's basically the detuned engine from the Honda Civic Type R, which is a quick engine. It also has a 10-speed automatic transmission. What makes the A-Spec different is its trim, including badging and these 20-inch wheels. On top of that, it has chunkier looking exhaust and it has a unique interior. Those are the standouts. This one has the super handling all-wheel drive system, but the crazy part is you can actually get one of these A-Specs in front-wheel drive only. One thing that a lot of you need to know is the fact that the RDX has some of the best cargo space in its segment. 79.8 cubic feet of space. That's with the seats folded. Ba-boom! It's just that easy to fold. Pull this lever, boom, it folds, which is great. But you know what else is really cool? Look at this. You have a very spacious cargo area under here, and then, boom, even more cargo space down here. Now you might be wondering about this. Well, this is where you have your inflation system because there's no room for a spare tire. It's kind of a bummer, especially if you really rip up your tire and you need a new one, but nonetheless, look at all that extra space. That is very, very useful. One thing you'll notice right away is that the interior is unique to the A-Spec, and that's because of these seats, which are leather, they're perforated, and they have Alcantara, so that's very nice. More stitching, all this red stitching once again for the A-Spec, including this really nice steering wheel, which is perforated on the bottom and has great grip and has red stitching, so that's also A-Spec. A lot of badges that say A-Spec, including here on the steering wheel, and of course the gauges overall design is unique to the A-Spec. But the important stuff is right here in the center. This center IP is both a blessing and a little bit of a nightmare. Let me show you what I mean. Welcome to True Touch Interface, the miracle provided by Acura, which will make everything easier on the road. Unfortunately, it really doesn't make everything easier on the road. What it does, similar to the way Lexus works, is it gives you a touchpad. Now, according to Acura, this is a 1-to-1 ratio with this screen. I'll explain. This is a 10.2-inch screen, which is very clear. Graphics are great. I actually really like its location as well. However, it's not a touch screen. See, touch, 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 touch. Nothing's going to happen because it's not a touch screen. All your touching is done here. That doesn't sound right, does it? All of this section here represents what this screen has. So, this section here actually represents this section of the screen. This section here represents this section of the screen. So let's start off over here. You can go through different cards. That is navigation, what's currently playing, and of course other components like the clock. But that's about it. Everything else happens over here. So going over to the home key, you have navigation, phone, FM radio, Bluetooth, XM, Apple CarPlay, but you may notice no Android Auto, and that's because, at least currently, for this vehicle, Acura has not procured Android Auto. They say it's coming soon. Okay, Now, this is supposed to be this. In other words, wherever I put my finger, that is supposed to be the area that corresponds with it. And after a while, you could see that it kind of works, but it's not perfect, to say the least. You can change the sensitivity of the touch, but regardless, one of the things you do while you're driving is you leave your finger there and kind of traipse along. This is what I do, at least. So sometimes when you're bouncing, bounce, 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 you want to hit Sirius XM, but instead you went to your Bluetooth, and that can be a problem if you're playing music that perhaps is considered inappropriate, which I always do. Now, you can change over one screen from another, but they do not work in conjunction with each other. In other words, even though they say this is a 10.2-inch screen, you're actually losing several inches over here, so keep that in mind. Now, in terms of how this system works, it's not exactly what I would call intuitive, and it's also very slow. When you trigger something, it can take a few moments for it to actually kick in. There you go, FM, takes a while. The sounds I don't like either, because it almost sounds like you've done something wrong when you've triggered something. Hear that? That almost sounds like, well, you made a mistake. But you didn't, because something actually happened. Settings, things like that, they take a little while to load as well. Now, this also goes into firing up the vehicle and getting the stereo system to kick in. It actually takes a little bit of time. So, once you get into the car, and once you've turned everything on, and once you've found whatever station you want to listen to, and you've decided that you want navigation, it's a very clear display, and the cool thing is you can swap everything. It just takes a minute to figure out. There we go. So now I know what station I'm on, what song I'm listening to, and there's my navigation. And of course you can select several different modes in the navigation system as well. The question I have is, why can't this just be a touch screen that's a little bit closer and they get rid of all this silliness? That's a question. Speaking of touch, this is something that Roman and I agree on. Now, Roman did drive one of these vehicles recently, and once again, he and I agree, great dynamics. However, this whole area here, well, let's talk about it. Now let's talk about the lack of a gear lever, and this is something that I've complained about, as have others, in regards to Honda and Acura products. My issue is that you do have to take your eyes off and look at it, and I've driven so many of these that you'd think I'd be used to it, but I'm not quite used to it yet. So in other words, in order to drive, you have to push this button. Neutral's this button, park is this button, and reverse, you have to pull down on this. Fortunately, the camera works, and you do have rear sensors. But you know what you don't get with this package? You don't get a bird's eye 360 camera view, which is, well, frankly, a little unusual. Now, going back into park, there is more, because you have this dynamic mode metal button. By the way, all the trim here, metal. Very cool. This has 4 functions. So, you can choose from Snow, which is an awesome little graphic up there, Comfort, which is another cool graphic, Sport, and Sport Plus. Let me break it down for you what this basically means. When you're in snow mode, it slows things down and increases the rate of traction control based on slippage. So in other words, if it detects slippage, it's not thinking high performance, it's thinking trying to save your butt. It also means that with the ABS system and everything else, it is in tune and engaged and prepared for snow, slippery conditions. When you go into comfort mode, it's supposed to relax things. Now, on the other RDX models that have adjustable suspension, this one does not, it will make things a little smoother. This just changes the algorithm for steering and acceleration, making it feel a little bit smoother. Now if you go over to the sport mode, this regular mode will change things in terms of the acceleration response and steering. Go over one more time to Sport Plus, and everything opens up, including the exhaust sounds. So you've managed to take a vehicle that can be fairly docile and you've moved it all the way to Sport Plus, and that allows this vehicle to become a little bit more thrilling around the corners. Here we are in Sport Plus. Now look, up here, turbo, and you have this G meter, which measures acceleration and your G movement. But here's the problem. Let me accelerate and show you what's going on with the turbo. Yeah, it's a graphic representation of what's happening kind of in terms of pressure, but you have no numbers. So you have actually, well, nothing to tell you what's really happening. You don't know how much boost you're producing. You don't know, well, really anything. So it's just saying, yes, you're using the turbo, and that's it. The same thing with the G meter on the right. It doesn't tell you anything when you go around a corner. It just moves around. It's not saying this much G has been exerted as you go around a corner or accelerate or brake. So they're kind of useless. I mean, it's kind of cool that they're there. It tells you you're in a special mode, but they're not very useful. Also in Sport Plus, these paddle shifters, which by the way, metal and they feel very good. Well, it keeps you in the mode. So in other words, it won't switch over for you when you're at red line. You stay in red line as long as you want when you're triggering these switches, and it's a lot like driving a manual transmission, or according to Acura, it's a lot like driving a vehicle with a manual transmission. The thing is, this is really cool, but it's kind of unnecessary, especially how dominant it is. Really, just having a button that you could trigger 4 times would be more than adequate. And if it means removing this and putting it somewhere else so we can get a gear lever back, I'm all for that. Normally, I don't like to go in depth with stereo systems because, in my mind, they're really not that unique. Except Acura has really pointed out that this one is really unique, and more power to them because it is. Let me explain. It is a 16-speaker audio system. It's known as the ELS Studio 3D system. Now, they're serious about 3D, and here's why. Because not only do you have these really cool-looking metal covers on the speakers that are on the doors, actually, a lot of speakers on the doors, but you also have roof speakers, and not just 1 or 2. No, you have 4. So you really are surrounded by speakers. And it's 710 watts of power. And it's very, very clear. Now, you can work the stereo system either through the steering wheel controls. You actually have a volume knob. Look at that. Pretty cool, right? Kind of rare. And you can select back and forth between stations, standard style, and of course you have the marvelous keypad down here. I personally recommend using the steering wheel control so you don't have to take your eyes off the road in order to use this damn thing. But regardless, it sounds spectacular. There are a lot of things you do not get with the A-Spec package, and you can't option it either. So if you want this stuff, you have to go to the advanced package, and that stuff includes a 360 camera, adaptive dampening, a heads-up display, 16-way seats, heated rear seats, and what I like to call the kick tailgate, which is basically a hands-free operated tailgate. This vehicle, as it sits, runs $45,800. Now, that is with the super handling all-wheel drive and the A-Spec package. You can go higher with the advanced package, which gives you a lot more tech, all the way up to $47,700. And there are still more options you could add to it. For a vehicle that starts a little over $37,000, that may seem like a lot of money, but considering the utility, the performance, and the amount of tech you get for that money, I think it's a hell of a bargain, no matter how you equip it. Thank you so much for joining me for the Fast Lane Car. This is Nathan. I'll see you next time.